Hello, today, Judge Napolitano was Judging Freedom YouTube channel. He asked Larry Johnson, a world intelligence expert, what cards does Trump have when he's going to have an upcoming meeting with President Putin or Leader Putin of Russia's name? See, America A through Z, our names have been used remotely since founding, right throughout a country's foundings. This is what I'm pretty sure this is part of what Vladimir Putin was trying to explain to Tucker Carlson, which is also a video that is on YouTube, um, but he was cut off. I think he was going to address how, like, for example, we should have had addressed here how James Madison had to force the other third of America's founders. One part, nature itself, shows that our one third willing and directing us was Native Americans by nature too. Nature showing us Native Americans are sickly distinctly their difference, used by a breaching method that uses black and white with subject treatments, where we have black people's whites of eyes, and that having been left out from subject treatments, for example, there are revelations that come with this, because we have not just replaced what nature communicates for us proper with subjects. This is inseparable from all subjects too. So, for example, and they have types of jobs, types of experts, the names of the people of the sciences. For example, there is a part in the Old Testament, in the beginning of it, that says, per science, it says, only defend right here, where the names of the people of the sciences will come together. And note that there are things we learn about through the nature of religions and the voices associated with them, distinctly from the books. And so that's a sequence shift self-valued where styles too. For example, that part can't be treated honestly by people. And then if we wanted to debate and have a subject treatment about the rest of the book, those people can't be honest about quality aspects of nature, about the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They can't afford people to hold on to that part that says only defend right here. And then they say, oh, you don't even know about this book. What do you know? We're the experts on the religion. We're the counters to it. And there are exceptions. Everyone's like, in other words. The same thing overtly, Connecticut interbranch use their differences, including their sexual differences, while they have been used since kids, like with the spots next to the colleges, with a whole bunch of different countries note shared here and there. There are proofs that they're directed to hide things, and for a whole bunch of reasons at the same time that aren't even real things to be hid. But that just rolls with where and how they make subject treatments, and capable as styles of logic, as natures of logic, the names of the people of the sciences, A through Z, even the best, most intelligent people, like Judge Napolitano and his sources, like Larry Johnson. But he has much wrong. And like when he has syntax, I didn't even finish the video. When they make syntax, oh, that's the predicate. There are a whole bunch of predicate acts with facts recorded. Connecticut's news locations and other community service, community television, and government access television, and their YouTube pages. They have roles with Russians in Ukraine at the same time with their doctors forced, and with wire crime acts and methods intercities connected. The intelligence community at Harvard Hospital's campus of Institute of Living, founded on the campus of Harvard Hospital in 1822. Larry Johnson also has syntax regarding adjusting people's medications. They have been putting fake things in databases with a whole bunch of foreign and domestic doctors involved with the courts multiple courts of Connecticut with their family members and intimate ties, and then further people at and next to the state judicial branch offices and next to the state corrections offices, involved with all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, wire crime acts and methods, mail crime acts and methods, criminally foreign influenced ones too, as predicate acts. See, there's a difference if there's a mail crime or wire crime and it's not criminally foreign influenced, let alone it's also interstates at the same time. It's also in a way that can show that there was conscious hyper criminal foreign influences at country A through Z, keeping the suits and ties, counters, exceptions, and collusion slash S with all location slash S, right where and how the suburbs were designed for torture, extortion, and slavery three ways. Manifest, where and how nature demonstrates it, but nature's demonstrations with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, and with criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, nature's names. Collusion slash S with those differences when they're own and with people's with difference. Therefore, everyone's name, individually grouped and together, keeping other things, others, ourselves blamed, right where nature itself and our founders communicated a human fact treating nature breaching method was and is involved. They did not have, they worse than did not have free speech. Everyone's speech was an extent of collusion slash S against everyone else, while being an extent of delusion slash S, delusions against everyone else. And when I say slash, that's too, where and how there's another nature. There are parts of our complete nature, where, like with the parts of speech, there is an identity of hyper invisible but still discernible, hyper conjunction to all parts of speech individually grouped and together, all subject treatments. In other words, you guys are using and valuing having been used. Exceptions and exception nature use tactical terror from how nature does. So in other words, these are all, in other words, they've been putting fake things in the databases at all ages and natures of campuses. Increasingly, a whole bunch of people at Harvard Hospital's Institute of Living are reported capacity demonstrated confirmed, having been roles planting evidences, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me on my street through time. In fake conversations they had with me with foreign and domestic military in Tuno, Saudi Arabia, ones recorded involved years before, as the ones at next to the World Trade Center and the court next to it, the Ninth Circuit Court, who planted evidences interstates with overt criminal enterprise, private ones now terrorists too recorded, and terrorists through time too recorded. The same ones that were next to Central Connecticut State University and various conjunctions to Central Connecticut State University in Connecticut, and the sides of it. They were through time involved with campuses intercities and with employments there, with their sense and sensibilities are being and have been used to use calmness or to use aggression as psychopaths and then pretending it's debatable. As people also collusion slash S, where and how, for example, forgiveness is relative to where and to how. Witch trials are about how the certain type of victim slash hyper victim was only allowed to be heard. Otherwise, that body would be censored, including if that body was a majority of people, including if that body was everybody, and it would be adapted to. And the breaching method was correct to know that any grouping of countries that would come from this, entertaining locations, areas, and states, influenced by itself syntactically, therefore functionally. In other words, this is clearer than day to little kids. Yeah, there are mistreatments of what nature communicates to us about how there was a breaching method against Native Americans before America's founders were even born. And it roles with everyone blaming it when they're arguing or making subject treatments regarding things, even where there are apparent. You guys are missing the breaching methods roles with it. And part of the reason everyone's missing it because campuses A through Z, sickly distinctly, they have roles with this. Fox Connecticut News has roles with names next to the state of Connecticut Education Department with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, including ones with medical, concentrated, personal and professional, with judges and prosecutors, with their kids, with time collusions with proven child abusers, leaders of the kids' force first, years apart. Because the differences of the guilt roles with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, they interbranch, individually grouped in together. They have predicate acts with fax methods recorded. They don't even know to an extent. They don't even know themselves. They just know it to an extent. It's plausible, like the ones involved with Luigi Guerrero and Jonathan Maiano. Our recorded capacity demonstrated confirmed involved with a Paul Zano too, with my neighbors who are involved with predicate acts with Wethersfield Police and a whole bunch of different police departments and state police, interstates with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, not legitimately foreign and domestic military, as the ones involved even with the Kuwaiti general, people from Israel and Jew and Israel scene involved with the World Trade Center attack and the spots next to it and their cousins, as the ones intercities and intra-city and tied to people next to each campus I went to, as the ones that with the police trying to start fights with us too. And when it's not them, the difference of that is used also. So it's important not to change my words. And Larry Martin will tell you. There's a Larry Martin. I don't know. I know any of who his educators were. But he's also involved with the people with the paraprofessionals, involved with all kinds of mixtures through the kids. They're timing how the kids have intimate and other ties, and they're also faking that. Specifically, where and how one of the things recorded is where and how all sides of criminal and civil cases and the courts and the police forums and their sources, including increasingly people tied to mayors, etc. There were increasingly collusion /S at all natures of crime scenes, as roles too, with effective methods of using and having used remotely criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions while pretending other. The voices of the branches of government and of the intelligence tied to them at country's excuse here, Anthony. So they have been switching and forging names into branch, Connecticut, as ones involved with the Ninth Circuit Court, with sequence shifting from in the court and all sides of the case that day before the World Trade Center attack, who are also people involved with a Detective Samuda, with various natures of indirect roles with former director FBI Robert Luskin, and with co-defendants of his, also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with corners on streets, with names associated with corners of streets on Church Street in Old Wethersfield, and the other houses on it, and on Copper Mill, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, where they're repeating fake things with the intelligence community. And they have collusion /S with the Facebook page, the YouTube page of Connecticut Government Access Television. And ones with the name Peruta are recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with lawyers of Wethersfield Police and of former director of the FBI, former standing chairperson of the Racketeering Influence and Corrupt Organization Act, Robert Luskin, his lawyer too, and people, his co-defendants, Robert Luskin's co-defendants, have roles with at and next to news locations with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the news at the same time with identity theft, fraud, slanders, predicate acts, and as collusion /S with all natures of crime scenes, increasingly with people who are personally criminally involved with them, like a Robert Rodriguez planting evidences on all sides of my house. Also with Joshua Julian. I don't even know where they live. I'm pretty sure Joshua Julian has roles living there, like where there are places and people associated with a Mike Violet and a Mark Violet, who are involved with also with a whole bunch of people at the Connecticut Capitol and next to it, with people named O'Brien and Cololo with all sides of criminal and civil cases, and people on and off the judicial branch offices and the corrections offices, involved with all kinds of natures of identity theft, fraud, slanders, including medical sexual offender collusions with women medical, like in associated with a Leahy family and with a Lombardo family, putting faked and changed transcripts and the whole fake transcripts at locations filmed 24/7, including medical campuses, including at colleges and universities. That, and increasingly with people next to them who have timed wire crime acts and methods with the same house/S, involved with increasingly intercities with a whole bunch of different falsified police reports and as collusion/S with all kinds of natures of crime scenes and with their motivations regarding it and regarding why and how the law is too hard some ways, while simultaneously other ways it's too easy on people. That's not by accident. Everyone's using the simultaneous tactical terror from how nature communicates about the difference of the simultaneous. Other species' bodies have two eyes, and we didn't invent that. It is distinct from us, but it is also non-distinct from us, and it is simultaneously with us, and not as us, but as us anyway. For what keeps it that that identity of value progression, where its identity relationship to itself and the value of that is why and how all these different species bodies have quality aspects in nature, distinct but also non-distinct, and simultaneously, but also / hyper simultaneously. So the difference between how people can't be honest about the first part of the Quran scientifically, I mean, I meant to say the Old Testament, the first part of the Old Testament scientifically, or about regarding the names of the people of sciences, with the part after the part that says only defend right here. So they can't afford that part of the subject treatment where the names of the people of sciences are the part after with the tree of life and the tree of knowledge of good and evil and the story of Adam and Eve, and then the spellings of the names of their generation there. By the way, Judge Napolitano and intelligence, please see ancientgamingsystem.com with alphabet decipher. This also is like it's a little bit. I have to, it has potential. No, remember, it's way better than that 8-ball. Remember that 8-ball? You ask your questions, or forget that. In other words, we are in a semi-ancient trap, and there is a difference between criminal insidious natures of peace and peace that is, hyper peace. That nature of peace that makes means come out of nowhere. Like all we had to do was have fact treatment. You guys are preventing me from asking online to get the interbranch on paper because they've been putting fake audio and video into their databases since I was a kid, with people from a whole bunch of other areas who've been planting evidence on all sides of my house, with the people brought up by the police confessions when I forced them to respond. Intercities too. And then they couldn't respond legitimately, so they had to fake conversations with me and ties to me. And that brought up is increasingly confessing and demonstrating things to me. Increasingly, people tied to O'Brien Silver and his educators have roles with identity, theft, fraud, slanders with prosecutors and judges, also with the Leahy family and a whole bunch of medical people, and the positions with the databases as further collusion /S with the breaching methods uses of reassignments of the database's identity /identities of relativity /relativities to ourselves relative to the republic for which we stand, its campus's Marcia system, and the function by the pantheism science to see through isms in its own, to be and stay led by how there is a distinct identity of hyper invisible, but still discernible, true always. If any, and per its roles with questions. It is why and how everyone asks questions to themselves and has questions presented to themselves by nature. But nature's communications are being and have been augmented. We are not being allowed to appreciate criminal foreign influences properly. Terrorists. Larry Johnson has a definition of terrorists. He said he agrees with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he attacks him other ways. The differences are where he allies with him or where he attacks him. This is fluent through our country's fake sides. Clearer than day. Tactically, delusions raw. In other words, how could they bring up words like anti-Semitism while they're calling it taxing and just faking it, faking communications with people and hate crimes with the judges and prosecutors, also with sexual groups and counters to them as collusions. In other words, fake motivations too, fake ties, fake natures of ties to complete strangers, collusion, and because no one wants to speak about that. Increasingly, people next to Trinity College, recorded, expressed, demonstrated, confirmed, they have people with the name DeMoro, Aiello, and Cololo involved with prosecutors and judges, and people that told lies to my science class teachers and against other kids, trying to hide their roles with it. All along Route 3, which goes by the state judicial branch offices. A whole bunch of different courts, family members, concentrated at probate courts, no. Multiple probate courts, judges, extended family members have roles with the intelligence community, with people with the name Della Fera I never had a class with. And they're increasingly spreading lies about me. Also with people with the name Casper and people with the name, in other words, increasingly tied to people with the branches of government, like with mayors and people tied to mayors and their family members, their neighbors, their conversations with them. The same thing with the police chiefs retired, tied to the same house with wire crimes near me, and the confessions of Wethersfield police involved with the wire crime methods. Also, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions, raw collusion /s, intercities with police departments and with news locations and exceptions tied to that. WFSB, Connecticut's Channel 3 News, and Rocky Hills increasingly reported, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed, involved with people tied to and as Mazzucato Bakery, involved with their neighbors too, like through ownerships, different ownerships there. A whole bunch of people from Wethersfield and people that were in classes with me that I never had conversations with at all. And the difference of that, the ones I did have brief communications with, the difference of that is also used remotely criminally foreign influence. As the names involved with all sides of criminal and civil cases in Connecticut, who are increasingly involved with the houses near me, involved with predicate acts and falsified police reports, and police that attached me to fake conversations with them, or even having gone down there as a kid. And the kids who did go down there when they wanted me to go down there and I didn't go down there, they planted evidences with the police in a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises, and they didn't want to. And they screened that. And that's increasingly being and having been brought up intercities to me, and intercampuses, and intra-campuses. And that's also recorded them confessing things where they're not supposed to confess those things. Former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, has roles with deans of campuses I went to and with leaders of kids, including ones years apart, the first force child abusers, leaders of the kids. They have more abuses of the kids of the leaders of the kids too, to keep where it is kept, where all subject treatments are using and valuing haven't been used. Exceptions and exception nature, tactical ulterior, faked and tactical ulterior from how nature does, even when correctly. In other words, all exception. In other words, this would have been. You guys are refusing to identify yourselves into Branch, Connecticut, with names increasingly tied to collusion slash collusions with people next to the campuses. I went and ones I didn't go to, and they'll tell you themselves. Everyone's being, in other words, kids from Wethersfield will court confess, demonstrate, confirm they were influenced to make confessions to me and not to have communications with me, just to make confession about a Peruta family and they don't know and others involved with people that live near me and people tied to them intercities and interbranch and interstates and foreign where they've been putting fake things in the corners of the streets of the schools I went. And these are the ones who had time collusion slash S with child abusers, leaders of the kids. They have the security families with the security of the schools involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the predicate acts with facts methods. Self-value too, because the differences of guilt was used by the breaching method to leave its roles out. That's why and how they have timed collusion. That's really why and how they have timed collusion slash S with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Like with John DeMoro is increasingly involved with FBI and other agencies with identity theft, fraud, slanders. I never saw him or his brother at the Wethersfield Shopping Center. I mean, or the one off Town Line Drive. But increasingly, people tied to John DeMoro have confessions tied to that spot. And there were demonstrations of that. Those are the people involved with that forced Saudis to collusions with them. And people with the name Scalora involved putting predicate acts on and off and next to the campuses. Increasingly, people from Hartford Hospital's Institute of Living, which is the triage side. With a part of it is with the triage side of Hartford Hospital. The rest of it is all space involved with all kinds of natures of organized crimes and intelligence putting faked and changed audio and video per their use of location slash S while being and having been used remotely, criminally foreign influenced, predicate acts with facts, styles, needs, and natures as criminal insidious natures. I'm not a lawyer, thank God. There are lawyers. There is a recorded how the sciences names are used from off the locations of all campuses since before anyone was born. There have been hyper additional collusion slash collusions at the campuses. And now this is one of the reasons we're going to have to make the subject treatments. We're also going to have to make predicate treatments where a predicate is a word valued by English, where and how it is relative, where there is a distinct identity of hyper invisible but still discernible, conjunctive to the parts of speech, individually grouped and together. And with the law values a predicate act because it is means to discern invisible slash hyper invisible but still discernible criminal insidiousness nature. But natural law is real. Black pupils. We have the same color eyes. We have the same color as eyes. And they are black and white, those colors. So we have nature communication. And again, other species' bodies have eyes. Distinctly, but also non-distinctly. Again, simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously. Relativity is here. Where they have theory, there are roles within nature debate contains nature's needs and styles. Who will as the breaching method do with self-value roles. With the syntax being and having been, fact, nature, quality, aspect, of sequence shifts. Nature debate, like when did any campus not have manifest all kinds of quality aspects of nature in demonstration of criminal foreign influences of those campuses? Black people. So in other words, Russians and American foreign and domestic military have roles of Wethersfield police forging and switching names, all kinds of stacking predicate acts and databases. With New Britain Superior Court, Harper Courts, and Connecticut's District Court too, with all sides of criminal and civil cases. as the ones also on off the state judicial branch offices and the state corrections offices, increasing collusion with all kinds of natures of organized crime and uses of them self-value, using the right to lie and using the positions maintained undercover and the elements with that, using it where they're not allowed to use that, like with their roles, collusions with the World Trade Center attack, predicate acts relative, and how they get away with it and got away with it, is lying about their motivations because haven't been used remotely since they were kids. How could they bring up a phrase like anti-Semitism, leaving out black people's whites of eyes? How could they bring up sexual groups' rights, leaving out black people's whites of eyes? You guys have roles with abuses of each age of fact treatment. You have a torture, extortion, fact treatment, identity theft, fraud, slanders. Manifest that way too. Nature showing this. So in other words, you guys are preventing mandated law, and you're using the serious, you're valuing uses of while being used remotely, valuing the serious of how there are wars going on, to pretend that someone else doesn't know what they're talking about, and to change and fake what we're saying as collusion/S with all sides of criminal and civil cases again. And increasingly, the breaching method uses them needing to pretend they could speak for, like, well, my belief is that we need to have faith in the government. Witch trials and slavery, let alone take them together, let alone even if, regardless if the witch trials were made up. The witch trials place is right next to the Webb House, where George Washington had to come using James Madison's plan before James Madison was even a founder. Not George Washington and his little army could have countered the overt criminal enterprises, private ones, terrorists, the countries that had slavery entrenched before America's founders were even born, northern colonies and southern colonies. Slavery against everyone. It's not even debatable. The only reason people get away with debating it is because of how they have obfuscated how slavery against black too, sickly distinctly, was northern colonies, southern colonies entrenched, and then America's founders were born. And then, in other words, before that, Christopher Columbus came, sailed the ocean blue in 1492. There are proofs already at countries A through Z. There are already locations, areas, and states criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions wrought. Not even realizing, because A through Z had been forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded to forget. And more to self-value being haven't been replaced, or even not realizing too how short words, let alone the projection, should be led by the identity that is hyper-simultaneous. If someone denies that there's a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible conjunction to all things, their logic, their reason will have demonstrated proofs of it too. That's why they can't get onto paper, into branch. They're switching names. They have been used remotely with their kids too. They have their kids involved with predicate acts with them. Thank God, at the same time, with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, intelligence, foreign and domestic, and at the same time. And in other words, these are not outcomes that are by accident, and these are not honest opinion natures when they pretend things are debatable, like what they think about the suburbs. In other words, so the North and the South had rules with a criminally foreign influence, torture, extortion, and fact-cheating nature slavery, therefore physical slavery method, entrenched northern colonies and southern colonies before America's founders were born. There were forced internationally monitored conversations that were hierarchical to everyone and everything, forcing this too, and forcing also forcing counters to that as collusions. Also, with the difference of that, because the breaching method maintains roles, communicating other, for the hyper difference, that used to lead the republic for which we stand, and the campus's Marcia system, and the pantheism that goes with discernments of the three parts of itself that are manifest as the parts of the body that is too big and too finite for us to discern, except for an extent. We can discern that individual identity of value / value progression. That is not our species body and is not the other species bodies. And it has all the species bodies with quality aspects in nature to demonstrations to us. But those demonstrations are being and haven't been replaced. Place. There are proofs that they changed their narrative regarding the international commerce, regarding what I said regarding straits and how we are a value / value progression, because they have been adapting to how the agencies, federal and states, interstates and intercities, intra-cities, same ones intercampuses and intra-campuses, the same ones at and next to parks, planting fake ties, fake natures of ties to people, right where and how we could observe how all natures of investigators, courts positions, where are used remotely, criminally, foreign influence, tactically, delusions, raw, and the difference of it being there, or at all natures of crime scenes, or difference on the ground locations, and the differences themselves of the suburban, and of the suburban / urban, and of the straight up urban, and of exceptions, and exception nature, but as nature communicates. Nature I'm using as a word for identity, where every identity has a semi-nature relationship to that complete identity that none are, but everyone can't help but be at the same time anyway. We could ignore its system, but it will demonstrate with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures. The breaching method effectively employed roles, needs, and natures, shown that they need to keep those demonstrations by nature itself, blamed on other things, others themselves. Even things as critical as getting to get right, as what caused slavery. Even when including collusions with uses of truths or lies. Money had roles with it, but that wasn't the reason. Everyone was fact, cheap, nature, tortured, extorted, and enslaved. They even went to have. That's really why they have. White people as Jewish or as Irish. Irish were enslaved too. It's not by accident. Everyone's just stuck on hyper stupid with black and white and with difference /s. Same ones who had time collusions with the World Trade Center attack, including as victims, locked into the fake and changed communications with others, pretended for them too. So per a method that keeps people using names of others and lying to themselves and others about why and how. Really, they're using other people's names and or saying what they think about them. Dishonestly, while pretending other. That's why they have collusions. The agencies have collusions with all natures of crime scenes and methods of violence. And to have that self-value, all I have to do is pretend to be against such. And in other words, they're going to defend their identity, even though it's about party with it. Wethersfield police have foreign and domestic military involved with them refusing to identify themselves legitimately and making confessions and then going away. And then putting fake things about their interactions with people. Then they want to go pretend they could have subject treatments like safety for themselves or for others. Wethersfield police station with a whole bunch of other police departments, personally, professionally with them and with their families and with the retired Weathersfield police chiefs. They have rules of predicate acts with facts, identity theft, fraud, slanders with campuses, methods, putting people in fake communications with each other, like timing where and making like a magic trick. Have time where someone's going to be, have them say something, and they don't even know each other, never had a communication. That's not even a communication. In other words, and then where they go back and forth all sides of cases. These are the people collusion/S with a whole bunch of people at Sandy Hook prison involved with all kinds of medical corruption and their patients and criminals and collusions at crime scenes with foreign and domestic military there and medical there. And involved also with differences rackets, black KKK, Confederate flag theme, increasingly with forensics locations too. Involved with all kinds of digital and medical crimes, mail wire crimes. They've been changing and faking what's actually digitally recorded. We have to examine the roles with uses of words like extremism and radical, where and how they have styles manifest forced by nature as predators / hyper predators before the breaching method, while through and how as victims / hyper victims. Forgiveness, however, is also because if we try to treat them as victims / hyper victims, they will change and fake what we say, and then increasingly self-value our roles with predicate acts with facts already stacked into databases and relative to the subject treatments only capable of being increasingly incapable of affording discern how exceptions in exception nature could be and were are faked, and roles with use of all natures of truth for lies too, and to screen lies and motivations increasingly needed by the breaching method to keep the breaching methods as a scientific value, to keep discernments of really why and how it has been replaced from the actual communications of James Madison. The founders behind him, his plan. So someone doesn't even know. In other words, that's the most principal thing to understand about American history. What battle? Get down. You guys don't care about that. Black pupils, you don't leave it out from one subject or you get it wrong. Boxing is strong. But the rest, I tell it best, boxing, martial arts, and wrestling are about fighting, but by the rules. But the rules have been abridged since semi-ancient times. So we have a whole bunch of natures, those suits, dies, counters, exceptions, people who bring up diplomacy, contrast it to war and say, well, look, it's either war or diplomacy. Leave out exception nature. There's a torture, extortion, fact-cheating nature, slavery method forced that country's A through Z. And what forced it is still being blamed on other things other than yourselves. That's why and how, in other words, please, get them on paper, one name in sequence. Judge Napolitano. So the British Superior Court has a whole bunch of people involved with all kinds of predicate acts, intercities, with people that went to schools I went, who have been putting fake things in databases roles with the leaders of the kids and the kids of the leaders of the kids, including a Dean Judd and his kid, are involved increasingly with the FBI Director Robert Luskin and Saudi attackers. And Saudis that simultaneously were forced to collusion/S, only capable of being tactical delusions relative. Where and how they're forcing everyone to it. In other words, Whiting Forensics has an O'Neill, someone with the name O'Neill, involved with West Hartford campuses too, increasingly involved with a whole bunch of different countries, and people involved with a principle being upskirt nature. And these are intelligence families who have their kids involved with them with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, and foreign and domestic military, next to Central Connecticut State University and conjunctions to it, and in other words, and next to that, like West Hartford locations, involved with increasingly with people named tied to Joseph Dennisism, but recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Although tactically delusions wrought too, so to the extent he doesn't know, extent he knows it's the least plausible of his confessions and demonstrations of his roles with a former mayor Gold and a Debbie Gold and a Lee Gold and his family members all along Route 175 from the founding locations with educators of his, with identity theft, fraud, slanders, all kinds of medicines, crime, drug crime roles, putting fake things in databases, and collusion/S with all kinds of natures of crime scenes, and names at and next to the state corrections offices, at and next to the state judicial branch offices, involved increasingly with Wethersfield police with people named Cololo, Kurt, and that live near me, and people tied to a Smith family that recorded, sought me out, that made threats to me. I don't know his name, but he's also involved with doctors, and he was pretending to be a patient. He might have been on security, but they have roles with foreign and domestic military through time, with people from other countries, like Afghan leaders and kids. Recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed involved with predicate acts with wire crimes and mail crimes with intelligence at next to Trinity College with my neighbors, as one's named Cololo and Smith. And the intelligence community recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed through time too. They've been planting evidence on all sides of my house, telling lies to me and telling lies to the and abuses of them too, and the difference of that. And people want privacy. Just honestly, if they wanted privacy, they would get on paper. They wouldn't make me beg to get the interbranch on paper, one name in sequence. Since I was a kid, they wouldn't put anything on paper because they've been screening their roles with a whole bunch of different countries, overt criminal enterprises, and now terrorists too, clearer than day. The difference about terrorists and criminal enterprises and the non-difference is criminal insidiousness. The non-difference is criminal foreign influences. Now, see, A through Z have obligations to speak about why and how they're going about value nature systems, tactile area, from how nature uses value. Leaving out how to, except in other words. It's not just that the markets never reach out to everyone with money properly. Excuse me. There are reasons. Nature shows us reasons why. It shows that reason/s why how these are different words. Money and resources. There's a reason there are different words, so we could discern hyperdifference. So Judge Napolitano, increasingly Hartford Hospital too, and Hartford Police Departments of retired police forms detected may have collusions with all natures of crime scenes and with corners of streets, and exceptions to that. A Joshua Stryker also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. I never had a verbal conversation with him. He's involved with sequence ships and names that investigators taking pictures to make illusions as collusion/s with a whole bunch of different countries with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and people at the state judicial branch offices in conjunctions to it involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, fake motivations for it too, and their roles with predicate acts into databases and then further at campuses is part of it because it's the difference of it exploited there next to it, crime scenes next to it, next to parks is where people speak and being measured and maintained and sensed. Who's going to make fact-sheet nature proper, which none have, like regarding the revelations. This is evidence how we have black people as whites of eyes. This is people speaking about evidence, have the nature debate regarding evidence, which the value of it. That also contains quality aspect of evidence. That's why we have to have mandated law followed. So Russians and American and Ukraine have collusion/s with a whole bunch of different natures of organized crimes here, and a whole bunch of different other countries too, and their roles with the medical families and military families, have have been repeating fake things to make it look like they know others. In other words, and that's increasingly, it's recorded how they have collusions with probate court judges, clearer than day, criminally foreign tactical delusions wrought with elderly homes, veteran homes, and hospitals, and prisons, where they have people locked up. They have tactical delusions wrought criminally, all kinds of natures of organized crime with those prisons too, with the crime scenes. Increasingly, Sandy Hook has roles with people, the doctors of Adam Lanza, increasingly involved with all kinds of drugs and evidences crimes and federal evidences crimes with guns. And the difference of the people who have the right to have guns and in other words, with Sandy Hook, with their Sandy Hook promises and Alex Jones, they have roles with FBI and the courts in the state of Connecticut judicial branch offices with Sandy Hook campuses and further in the news, pretending fake passions and emotions while confessing that too. Because I didn't know who's responsible. That's also the narrative regarding that is also used to measure and maintain, but the breaching method left out. The breaching method used you guys remotely. That's why you guys can't get on paper with the interbranch and the news at the same time. Won't get on paper, won't take me off the fake conversations with themselves and with others. They have all kinds of natures of organized crimes with the fake stuff they've been putting in the news store articles as collusion / that's with all kinds of natures of crime scenes and with and as straight up psychopaths, where and how they have calmness and where and how they have aggression. They have a lot of audacity. Hartford, Connecticut. The same ones from Wethersfield, Connecticut have roles with the names next to the schools in Hartford, like a CCSU magnet school, is involved with people increasingly with the name Scalora, Intercities, involved with some medical and sexual offenders of kids. There are proofs that there is the intelligence community influence to carry, not even knowing, like a hairdresser I had a few times, to put fake and change communications. Otherwise, she lied. In other words, fake ties to me with the Scalora family. A Scalora family has been pretending to know me, and people tied to them have been pretending to know me since I was a kid, and to my family members, and with the courts and overt criminal enterprises and private ones, increasingly at the same time, collusion / intercities, and with names next to the campuses increasingly involved with ones with wire crimes as families together on my street through time, ones that don't even live here anymore, involved with wire crimes through time with the police departments, plural. Let's get them on paper, one name in sequence. And I want a response for the principal child defenders' confessions and confirmations to me, and why and how that they left out their roles with untimely deaths years apart too, as the ones who intercities had untimely deaths, totally different ones, and murders involved, and timed freaking out and trying to make fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. That's how other things are recorded too. A Robert Rodriguez recorded with them, also with a Joshua Julian. On the Facebook page, roles with on Facebook, people on Facebook, a page of a principal child offender who forced it, principal upskirt nature with other natures of worse digital crimes with kids, sexual and medical offenders of kids, including women in the medical family of a Leahy family, and multiple men with the name Leahy. And they have their kids involved too on Facebook, planting evidences, switching it. And Facebook is collusion personally and professionally with these people too. And since before Meta. And they hid collusion / S with that, including with their roles with syntax regarding extremism. And when they changed it to extremism, and when the difference of that, or the roles with the FBI too, with more upskirt pictures on Twitter before the sale of X, they should not have hid that. And that's increasingly tied to people with the name Ian that I never had a verbal conversation with at all. I don't know Ian. He's increasingly tied to people at campuses, including medical campuses, that are increasingly tied to sexual and medical offenders of kids and people near the schools, planting identity theft, fraud, slanders, and collusion / S. And these are people also with medical in California But it's also the differences of the roles with the guilt is used to hide behind by the breaching method. That is a scientific value associated with with these questions, like what is slavery about? Human slavery is about a human fact treatment nature breaching method, and it's about other things at the same time, like about how it is a predicate acts with facts method, and where and how it is about all sides of criminal and civil cases, the lawyers, the courts at the same time, the news at the same time, put in the same sequence shifts, criminally foreign influence, fact treatment nature, quality aspects, nature, and collusion/s, also increasingly with other names in the scientific name of the scientific value of the human fact treatment nature breaching method. That is only one of the things, but there were other things that is true always as slavery. It is only variably as true as racism. In other words, everyone was forced to different roles as fact treatment nature, tortured, extorted, and enslaved. Names A through Z of the human species body at all locations, areas, and states per a method using remotely think quality aspects of nature inherent to our active relativity to and progressive relativity to our syntax nature, let alone with convictions, with guilt, let alone with the difference of that, collusions there, or at form the crime scenes or the prisons themselves. Increasingly at just the corrections offices too. Are the names with the Sandy Hook prisons and other prisons who have been hiding live progressions and collusions. Increasingly, Joshua Julian, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Mark Violet has him involved, planting evidence on my street with people named Violet and Cololo, who have a whole bunch of different falsified police reports with them, and roles with the businesses and houses next to Harvard Hospital with them, with some KKK, black theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, Korean theme, time collusion with different rackets. In other words, and with sexual and medical offenders of kids and of elderly and of veterans. We're gonna see. We're gonna examine. So they have roles with, in other words, the syntax regarding people that with their positions and why and how there are money, resource. No, we're gonna show the difference between why their money, like words like money and resources, are distinct words. So, but we cannot leave out the all the criminally foreign influence uses of databases, identities of relativity, as collusion/s, with that at locations that no one wanted. At all locations/s, everywhere the human species body is, no one wanted it except for how everyone has been roles, blaming other things, others themselves. Like for one, in other words, well, we didn't cause that, and that's all we could do. That's right. But when people say, "Well, we can't control those things," then why they shouldn't change what other people say when they're not going to leave out the smallest finite detail, like those collusion/s that witch trials are about, and that slavery is about, and that Jim Crow law is about, that criminal incompetence on both sides of cases, keeping the breaching method screened as its roles with that hypercriminally foreign influenced everyone too at the same time. Worse. Let's all rehearse boxing. Who disbelieves?